Hello, it's me again, Phil Croshaw, and it's now day 20. We're still going strong. It's day 20 of 31 days of live streaming in August, and we're still there. Only just, but we're still there. And I thought today what I would do is talk a little bit about some of the people that have inspired me over the past 10, 15 years of interviewing people. Most people who watch this will know that I have actually been, I've interviewed over 563 now people. So you can imagine I've picked up all sorts of things in that process. So today I'm going to be talking about some of the people I've interviewed and the people I've been perhaps inspired by or picked up tips that have kept with me. So I always try and stick with one thing out of every interview I ever do that I think that's useful to know, or I'm going to take that on board. So I've got probably about 563 different things I've picked up because if I've interviewed 563 people. So we'll do the intro, give people time to get in and watch, ready to watch, and then I'll show you some clips and we'll basically ask, what's the point?
I want to be there and baby dance the night away. I let my head down if I want. Don't you just get tired chasing fame and being pretty all the time? Doesn't sound like fun. You can do better. Let me show you what a good time looks like. You can do better. You can do better. Let me show you what a good time looks like. You can do better. I dare you to be wilder. Let me show you what a good time looks like. My shoes off if I want. Let yourself be free and maybe you will find that there is more to life than being pretty. Honey, let's just face it. Baby, let your head down, be a little wilder. Baby, kick your shoes up, you don't have to hide it. Baby, let your head down, be a little wilder. Baby, kick your shoes up, don't hide it. I don't fit into your box, beauty queens without no flaws. You can do better, I dare you to be wilder. I don't fit into your box, beauty queens without no flaws.
Okay, there's the intro, and hello again. I'm Phil Croshaw, and welcome to this episode of 31 Days live streaming in August. And as I said at the intro, we're still going strong, but today I'm going to talk about I'll give you some examples of people that have inspired me over the years. As most people know, as I've said before, I've interviewed over 563 people now over the last 10 or 15 years. Video interviewed and podcast interviewed them. And I thought it'd be useful just to have a quick look at some of the people that have inspired me and a few little points made. Now, I've done this before, actually, but not online, interestingly. So I call it What's the Point? And I pick out particular things that people have said that have stopped me in my tracks or inspired me or got me thinking or reflecting through those interviews. But I normally do them in a, excuse me, just need to take a quick drink. I've done them in a live environment. So you can imagine in a room where you've got people in the room and for maybe a networking event, and you want to try and stimulate conversation, you want to try and stimulate people getting involved and engaged. So one of the things I've done is I've showed clips from various interviews that I've done over the years and said, I've asked the question at the end, what's the point? In other words, what's the point that you think that this person is trying to make as part of that one very small clip? And it's worked really, really well in live environments. So I thought what I'd do is I just show you a few of examples of this and a few clips, as I say, that have inspired me and that have got me thinking or reflecting, or even helped me to work with clients to develop the thought even further. Sometimes they call these things thought leadership. Sometimes it's just what I've heard called aha moments. And when you're in those environments where you're listening to somebody speaking, or online or offline, and you suddenly think, aha, that's a good point, or aha, that's actually worth thinking about further, or aha, I need to make a note of that and find out more. So some people call them aha moments. So of course the biggest challenge is, what do you choose? Bearing in mind, I've got obviously interviewed so many people, and I've been inspired by so many people and educated by so many people. What clips do you use? Especially when you've got a tickly cough. It's not COVID, it's a tickly cough. How do I know? I don't know. I've not been tested, but I'm pretty sure it isn't, because I've had it for about 9 months. So maybe I was the first person back in, not 9 months, longer than 9 months, actually, before everybody starts panicking. As I say, really difficult to decide. So I'm going to just pick a few right at random to use for this particular episode, this particular live stream. And as I say, I always say, information, ideas, inspiration, and insights. That's what I'm about. That's what Geek is about. And hopefully you'll get something out of these clips. If people enjoy it, I'll run maybe some more in the future, because if it's popular, obviously it makes sense to do that. So the first clip is with a guy who is a hero of mine, to be honest, a business hero, I suppose you could say. Back when in 1996, I know I don't look old enough. In 1996, I went around the world for a year. And no, for those people that are trying to claim that because I'm a shorty, that I was able to jump in somebody's suitcase and travel around with them, that is not true. That's a nasty rumor, and my lawyers will be definitely all over it if anybody tries to suggest that. But if you have any comments, or if you've got any questions, just whack them in the comments section of whatever platform you're listening to this on or watching this on. It'll be on Live Streamers Association platform, Phil Croshaw, my YouTube, and Philip Croshaw, my Facebook. So just whack it in the comments, or if you've got questions, then please do. So anyway, I digress, as I often do. I was in the process of traveling around the world for about a year. Took a year out, just decided it was something I always wanted to do. And there was a particular time in my life, it was a good time. I'd kind of got a bit bored of the work I was doing and decided I needed a fresh challenge. So rather than just jump straight back into another job, I decided to go around the world for a year. Anyway, whilst I was traveling around the world, I came across an author, because you can imagine when you're traveling around the world for that long, you get to read so many things that you wanted to read, and some stuff you just came across by accident. And a guy I came across was a guy called Charles Handy. And Charles Handy is basically, he's a management thinker. He's a speaker. He's a guru. He's a brilliant author. And I was very fortunate enough to know somebody who knew him. And as a result, they arranged for me to go over to his house in Norfolk. And he very kindly did a video interview with me about his life and his experiences and his perspectives and his insights. And it was just a fantastic interview. So, and also probably worth mentioning is that Charles's books are still a great read even today. The Age of Unreason, I think, was one. The Elephant and the Flea was another. The Empty Raincoat was another. And actually, Charles Handy was talking about portfolio working in 1995 to 96. And now here we are, of course, with a lot of us portfolio working. So that vision was, to me, was staggering, because in the mid-90s, you didn't have multi-careers. It was like, on your CV, if you had a gap in your CV of more than 6 months, everybody thought you'd been in prison or something. You know, explain where you were or during this 6-month period. It's hard to believe now, but that's definitely how it was in the day. So anyway, I'm going to just play this clip of Charles talking to me, and we'll then have a chat about what do you think his point is, what do you think he's saying, and how can we pick up or learn from it. So this is Charles. This is the Charles Handy video clip. Let's have a look.
Well, writing books is, you know, there are lovely moments. There are lovely moments when you go out to dinner with your publisher, and she, in this case, my case has nearly always been she, says, lovely idea, and I'll write you a letter confirming our deal. And that's wonderful. You've got a contract, you've got a title, and then the hard work starts, actually. And I find there's usually about 3 false starts. And you've got to dedicate yourself, you've got to shut yourself away. That's why we have a place in the country as well as a place in town where nobody can interrupt. You know, we shut ourselves away. Every morning at 8:30 to 1:30, I'm alone, you know, sitting, staring at a blank piece of paper or a blank television screen or computer screen. Desperately trying to think of something sensible to say, coming down the next day and wiping it all off and starting it all over again. And it takes 2 years to make a book, in my experience. I mean, with the research, talking to people, and so on and so forth. And yes, you've got to believe. You have a I mean, I think everybody doing their own thing is a love-hate relationship. I can't believe that I'd ever be happy doing anything else. It doesn't mean I don't hate it when I sit there and I can't think of what to fill that screen with, you know. But you have to do it, because that's what you do. You know, that's your life. So you have to be passionate. There's no good, if you want to be independent, thinking up some bright business school business plan and saying this would fill a niche that I can see. If you're not passionate about it, it won't work. The entrepreneurs, we call the alchemists, people who create something out of nothing, the ones that we interviewed for a previous book, if they hadn't been passionate, if they were just there to make money, it wouldn't have worked. They just really wanted to do this thing. They really wanted to put this product on the market. They really wanted to create this chain of shops. You know, they really believed that this was something very special that only they could do. Yes, if it worked, they'd make money, but that wasn't the point, because when they made the money, they did all over again. You know, it's no good. So it's the same with books. If you don't want to write the book and don't care passionately that you have something to say, it won't work.
What an awesome clip that is. And I remember when I was doing that interview, being just one of the problems, one of the great things about interviewing people like I do is that I'm passionate about and curious about people's journey and their experiences. And what I remember is from that was just being almost a bit like spellbound. It's almost like, you know, somebody that I'd been reading, whose book I'd been reading on some beach in California when I was traveling. And there I was a few years later, sat in his back office in Norfolk. And it was one of those pinch me moments, really. There's so many different things you can take from that. And as I say, that was actually one of the books I didn't mention. The Alchemist is something that Charles wrote with his wife, I think Elizabeth. And yeah, that was about entrepreneurs, and they researched entrepreneurs. So still a great book. Pretty sure it'll be on Amazon and Kindles, and it quite possibly now on Audible as well. But that whole thing, what it brought home to me was the importance of dedication. You know, the idea, because lots of people have the idea of writing a book, and it's said that there's a book in every one of us. And I believe that to be true. There's a book in every one of us, but the dedication it takes to sit down and write that book or type that book in this day and age is very, very, very significant, especially for it to be good enough to go on sale and for people to actually pay money for it. And yes, you can get people to obviously to do ghostwriting and all that kind of thing. But the truth is that that dedication and obviously Charles there as well talks a lot about passion. And we've talked about this on this channel before, about the importance of the passion. And it's true, because if it's going to take you 2, 3, 4 years to make your business work, then if you haven't got the passion, as soon as it gets rocky, as soon as it gets tough, and it will, I promise you, then the passion is not there. You'll just lose interest and you'll think, oh, well, might as well go back and get a job. So you've got to have a passion for the subject that you're doing. You've got a passion for the thing that grooves your truffles, as they sometimes say. And you heard Charles there saying that he would disappear off for half a day, dedicated 8 till 1 in his particular case, and he'd be staring at the screen and trying to come up with the inspiration and trying to come up with the ideas. And bearing in mind, when Charles was writing a lot of these books, the reality is there was no internet. So his inspiration had to almost like come from within him. And I know some of you at a certain age will be thinking, what do you mean there was no internet? There's always been internet. There hasn't always been internet, honest. So that dedication, and then coming down the next morning, having written a load of stuff, and then thinking, that doesn't work. I've not quite got that right. Scrubbing it all off, getting rid of it all, and starting again. To me, that is amazing dedication. Excuse me, and shows a lot of passion. So that was, for me, that was a great opportunity to meet one of my, I suppose, one of my business heroes, if you like. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So the learning from that, what's the point? I think the point is questions to ask yourself, really. Are you passionate enough for your business? Are you passionate enough now for your business? Because obviously everything's changed massively in the last few months. Are you passionate enough? Are you dedicated enough to it? Do you still believe in your heart and soul that it's viable? And I've seen and come across a lot of people who've fallen out of love with their businesses, mainly because it's been so hard at times, and they've had so much heartache and so much stress that they fall out of love with the business. And in effect, what happens is the romance disappears. And when the romance disappears, they struggle to keep motivated. And then you're getting into all sorts of areas of mental health and all sorts of things. So that was Charles Handy. The next What's the Point clip is with a guy I met through a very good friend of mine. And that gentleman is a guy by the name of Jim Castle. Cassel. And Jim Castle is used to be the youth team manager for Manchester City's youth team. But this was before the Middle East and the Arabian entities arrived at the show. This was in the very early days. And Jim was recognized as a fantastic leader and a fantastic football coach. But most Man City fans of a certain age will probably remember him. And he was definitely credited with bringing a number of key players through the ranks to become the stars that they became. I think Joey Barton might have been one. Daniel Sturridge, I recall, I think he talked about as well, and numerous others. And they were all big fans of his. Softly spoken man, and he became a friend, really, but very inspirational. And one of the things, when you meet these people and you do these interviews with these people, they actually don't realize the impact or the difference that they made to your life. And this happens even to me, believe it or not. I will sometimes now and again get an email from somebody or a text from somebody that I've worked with, or I've worked, in my business, or even worked with as a boss in my corporate days. And you'll get a message through that says, you don't realize this, but I've now got to the point where I'm at the level you were at when you were my boss. And you were one of the driving forces behind my career getting to this point, because without you, I don't think I'd have had the drive. I don't think I'd have moved forward. I don't think I'd have got over that particular challenge I had. That's an amazing experience. And I think anybody that's doing coaching, mentoring, consultancy, just giving general advice to friends and family, there's nothing more satisfying than somebody turning around and saying, I am what I am, or I got to where I got, partly because of your influence and your support. And that makes it so worthwhile. And that was definitely the case with Jim. A number of footballers recognised that Jim had been the guy that had been very significant in their careers, in their football careers. So this is the clip, and I just want to talk to you. I want to reintroduce this to you because it's something that stuck with me. And Jim is talking here about twig carriers. So you're either going to buy into this, you're not going to be happy about it. You might recognize others that are. Maybe you might even recognize yourself as one. Here's the truth. I recognize twig carriers. I didn't know they were twig carriers until Jim Castle introduced the concept, but I now can look back and I now see them in companies I work with, the twig carriers. And bear in mind that Jim was very successful in taking City to win the Youth Cup at the time. I think it was the first time they'd ever won it. And as I say, it was before all the money rolled in. And I think they won the Academy Youth Cup. And so his leadership was recognized as being instrumental in that process. So let's just see, let's hear about twig carriers, and then we'll ask what's the point that Jim's making.
Twig carriers are basically the biggest problem in any development program of any type and any size of any company. And I'm going to define a twig carrier because you have to have an analysis process if you're going to do something. I quite often judge people on what would happen if we were shipwrecked on a desert island. There's no computers, there's no line of command. Basically it's about survival. And when you look at personal skills in that environment, it's totally different than when somebody has a position, because a position in the company doesn't mean wisdom and doesn't mean that people will buy into that. So therefore I assess them, and when you look at them, quite often the only role that they can have is to go and get some wood for the fire, hence the term twig carrier, because that may be the most beneficial use they can be to the survival of the group that are shipwrecked on the desert island. No, you don't need twig carriers. They are the worst form of, to me, associate that you can work with, because their only concern is about their personal development, their personal career. It's not about being part of the big picture, developing the company. And everybody within a company is a piece of scaffolding, and it has to be linked together properly. If your scaffolding isn't linked together, it will very soon tumble.
Okay, scaffolding. That's an interesting one, isn't it? So, who watching this now live or recorded recognizes the term twig carriers? Probably not overly politically correct in this day and age, but I have a view, and it's my view, and other people might disagree, but just because it might be unpopular and just because it might be even uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not true. And I think that's true of a lot of things in life. And I've certainly had my fair share of twig carriers. And it's basically, as you can see from what Jim said there, it's people who are passengers on the boat. Sometimes I used to call it back in my corporate days, where you had people on the ship, on the boat, that were just passengers that would just basically not contribute. In fact, it gets even worse than that. Sometimes twig carriers will also try and sabotage it. Because they're not part of it, they may try and sabotage it. And that's when they start gossiping about people, stirring it behind the scenes, seeing it, done it. You must know some of these people. I think there's probably an 80-20 rule. Probably 20% of people, maybe 10-20% of people are twig carriers, and the rest obviously add the value and make the difference. So think about that. Think about the people that you've got in your company that are the twig carriers. And I would say that in the current climate, I would say a lot of senior people in companies are in the process of sussing out, they will not be calling them this, but sussing out who are the twig carriers that they can now do without. And the part of the reason for that is because when everybody is losing jobs and when everybody's being made redundant, nobody's really taking any notice because it's just somebody else that's losing their job. Now, listen, I know this is really kind of quite hit heavy, and I know it's very relevant and quite an emotional subject and an emotional topic, but it's all about the team, and it's about having the right people on the team and the right level of energy and contribution to the overall success of the business, not being in the silo mentality, the politics that we can probably all relate to as well. So Jim Castle from Manchester City, or who was at Manchester City, talking there about twig carriers. And I now recognize those twig carriers in organizations when I go and work with them on a consultancy basis. So the whole idea there of the twig carrier is just basically to recognize them and either convert them into something that's adding more value, or alternatively get them into a more appropriate role or a different role. So that's Jim Castle from who was Man City's Youth Academy manager. Next person, and it's funny because he will probably have no idea that he's inspired me, I doubt. But the next person I'm going to introduce is an interview I did with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Parr. And he'll probably have no idea that he's inspired me, but he has. Kevin runs Parr Marketing and is a speaker in his own right. Very, very lively guy, very energetic, quite outspoken at times, but really high energy and a really interesting guy to listen to. And he was telling me when I interviewed him, he was talking to me about how digital marketing wasn't the only game in town, and how people sometimes miss the opportunity because they were too focused on digital and not thinking about other, what you might call offline strategies and offline tactics to improve the marketing of the business. So let's just hear what Kevin has to say, and let's let Kevin introduce the story of the mouse. Not joking, the story of the mouse. Here you go.
We did some work with an independent pest control business. Now, the biggest independent pest control business in the Midlands. These guys actually built a wonderful program of enticing people in, and it was so simplistic. Effectively, you could say direct mail doesn't work anymore. Well, doesn't it? Because these guys, they bought a series of clockwork mice from a toy shop. On the bottom of the clockwork mouse, they actually put a little sticker that said, "If in danger of finding me, ring this number," on the bottom. And it was their number on the bottom. So if in danger of finding me, ring this number on the bottom. Okay. And along with this clockwork mouse, which they popped into an A5 envelope with some shredded mouse bedding from a local pet store and a note that read, "Hi, my name's Dave. I'm on the run from Pest Busters. If you find me, please ring the number on the bottom and they'll come and collect me." Now, actually, can you believe it? What they did was a strictly focused and targeted mail shot to 100 key decision makers in sort of operational management and maintenance positions within companies that wanted to buy this stuff, that had to buy this stuff on an annual basis. What do you think the response was from those 100 companies? What do you think the percentage rate of conversion was from that 100 sent out? 80%. 80% conversion rate for appointments, and they converted 20% of that 100 into real business. And that is a real life, down-to-earth, honest example. They are still using it to this day. And it's because it's innovative, it's creative. You've got the clockwork mouse coming out the other end. It penetrated all the normal filters. The clockwork mouse came out, people were winding it up, sending it off, women chasing blokes, blokes chasing men through the business with it. Have you seen this bloody clockwork mouse from the, and all of a sudden people were talking about that really simplistic but hugely powerful message. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody runs out and buys a clockwork mouse, but I think that kind of illustrates what the point is, which is if your marketing doesn't penetrate the filters, if it doesn't make people smile, or ineffectively where it's appropriate make them smile, or doesn't get their attention in some way that's different from everybody else, you've got a problem. Because everybody's trying to hit the same companies with the same messages and exactly the same tools and techniques that have been used in the last 50 years, 100 years. Nothing's new, really. It's just reinvented, polished off and dusted down. You've got to find the angles that will actually inspire people to engage, and you've got to think of the ways that would actually make those people interact with you.
Absolutely fantastic. I love that story. Dave the Clockwork Mouse. So you've had twig carriers, you've had now Dave the Clockwork Mouse. But you can obviously see what the point that Kevin's making there is about, and it's just as relevant today as it has been forever and a day, but even more so perhaps now. And that's getting people's attention and being creative around the ways that you get people to engage with your brand, engage with you as an individual. And it's about exploring and testing and all that wonderful stuff. So yeah, fantastic story. I mean, Dave the Clockwork Mouse has stuck with me for many years. Kevin won't realize that, but it has. And I'm delighted and very grateful that when I interviewed him, he told me about Dave the Clockwork Mouse. And actually, I unashamedly told other people about the Clockwork Mouse story from what I got there from Kevin, because I thought it was such a great story. And other companies and other clients went away and were inspired by the Clockwork Mouse story and did their own versions of it, or slightly different things, but they kind of understood the principle and the concept, which I thought was brilliant. So that's Kevin Parr. That's Kevin Parr and the story of the Clockwork Mouse. The next person that I interviewed, again, great respect for this guy. Very inspiring speaker. He's an author as well, and he's called Nigel Risner. And this particular clip, Nigel's talking about how he had a great time. He became extremely successful and very wealthy, and then all of a sudden the doo-doo hit the fan. And he had some very significant challenges, but he tells it very, very well as a story. And I think one of the things about it is that his use of humor on something that's so quite serious, like, going bust and bankrupt, but he still tells it in such a story, in such a way that it entertains you, which I think is great. So we'll obviously watch this clip. Let's move that out of the way. We'll watch this clip with Nigel Risner, and then we'll ask the question, what's the point?
And when I left school, I was given an opportunity really on to work for a commercial finance company, about 500 yards from the building we're in right now. And I did really well with this finance company, and I was promoted, and then I gave it up to play tennis for a year, came back, and I set up a finance company with an estate agent. And he gave me £12.80, and he said, you can have the whole company, you'll be the manager of this finance company. And about 5 years later, in 1987, I bought him out for £1.4 million. That was fun, because in the late 80s, anyone could do anything, as long as you had a bit of money and you had a good mouth. And I had a good mouth that was big. So I was cool at doing what I did. And I raised a lot of money with venture capitalists, and we were 7 days from going public. I was the youngest chief exec in the city at 27. And things were really going well till 1990. Interest rates went to 15%, and we lost £1 million, which kind of was neat for my investors, as you can imagine. They were really chuffed with that one. And I asked for a pay rise at my worst ever period because I wasn't doing really well. And my only sob story part was that I bought a house on the basis of going public, and we didn't. And my board didn't really care. And my son has mild cerebral palsy, and I was paying a fortune in physiotherapy bills. And I thought, how do I earn more money? And I went outside my house one afternoon, and I was cleaning my car, and I thought, this could be my opportunity. I could use my company car to go executive car hire. And then I realised you need a licence to do executive car hire. So I thought, I could use my car to be a minicab driver, because in the late 1989, 1990, wasn't the big furore going on now, and I understand what it's about. So I thought I'd go minicabbing. And I went to the local minicab office to see if I could do some driving at night, because I thought that'd be cash. And the guy went, yeah, you can, but you'll need a reasonable vehicle. He said, obviously you won't use that vehicle. I said, well, what's wrong with that vehicle? He said, well, it's a Bentley. I said, well, that's all I've got. And so for 7 months, I started mini-cabbing in my Bentley. And what was interesting for me was that instead of blaming the government and blaming my son and blaming the world, I realised most of us have got everything we need to make a difference. And it was one of the turning points which, if I look back at the time now, I didn't realise was that tipping moment. But every time I've ever got stuck, what can I do with what I've got instead of who can I blame?
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. How relevant is that today? The blame culture. We have a terrible blame culture, and I think it's been brought to the fore. I don't want to get political, but it's been brought to the fore with everything that's been happening with COVID. It's who can we blame? Let's blame Matt Hancock this week. Let's blame Boris this week. And to be fair, it's not just the government. The blame culture's everywhere. Personal responsibility, to me, seems to be almost a dying art in a sense. And I know I probably would say that being a bit older, but I certainly believe that to be the case. What makes me chuckle about that, about that particular story, excuse me, is I can just imagine this guy's face when he said, well, what vehicle, what, you're not using that vehicle, are you? He said, well, yeah, I am. Well, it's a Bentley. And you can imagine his face thinking, hang on a minute, most people who turn up here want to do mini cabbing. What I've got a Mondeo, so I can find that quite amusing, to be honest. So I think the point, what's the point? And I think the point that Nigel's making is that bit about we've got everything we really need to make a difference already. And but we've just got to be creative, and we've got to be dedicated, and we've got to be adaptive. And that's, for me, the story there. And it's so relevant for today, isn't it? We've got to adapt. And that I always remember that and think of that when I'm looking at different ways to do things. I always think of that clip about, we have to adapt to our circumstances. And that can be all sorts of different circumstances. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about our circumstances around work and employment, obviously. But there's all sorts of other things that will happen to us and happen to our partners and our families, related to health and all the rest of it. So, it really is about taking personal responsibility, not blaming everybody else, not blaming the world. It is what it is. Not blaming the virus. You know what? As far as I'm aware, the virus doesn't have feelings. I don't think. I think it just, it's almost like search and destroy, isn't it? And it doesn't have feelings. So on that basis, I would suggest that, think about that. Think about your own life. Think about your own challenges, and think about Nigel's been there. He's been there. He's done that. And obviously he adapted to that. And he very much is about get on with it, make the changes and crack on, because it is what it is. And again, as I say, I was very inspired by that. I mean, the whole interview with Nigel was superb. And again, I just think it's a cracker. And there's more clips from that I could show, and perhaps I will, if people like this sort of thing, I can show more clips and do more what's the points. So that's Nigel Risner. How are we doing for time? Ooh, it's nearly 40 minutes already. Right, so the last and final one for today is a guy who I met. I actually made a comment. It was online, but it was before, I think it was before Facebook. But he put a comment online somewhere on a forum. That's right, it was on a forum. And he was talking about the fact he'd written this book, Making Ideas a Reality. And I thought it was really interesting. I bought the book and I thought it was a fantastic book. But it was all around inventing. So, a lot of people were doing stuff in entrepreneurial terms around services. And as we know, the UK is particularly into services. But he was actually an inventor in America, inventing things. And the guy's called John Capriola. And I've kept in touch with him ever since that time, which was, crikey, 15, 20 years ago, originally when I spoke to him. And he lives in Florida. In America, And he's got a long story, which obviously I didn't have time to show you. But I just thought I'd play this clip because I thought it was just an interesting insight from a real entrepreneur doing really entrepreneurial things. And he kind of inspired me, and it made me think and stop with this particular clip. So let's just have a listen to John. Do you know what I find remarkable about your journey and your story is that there must have been people, and maybe I was one of them at the time when I think back, quite possibly, that thought that maybe you were bordering on being crazy. And I mean that in terms of developing something and taking on an industry that's got and I'm not exaggerating, obviously, multi-billion-dollar turnover types, global empire.
Right.
The Legos of this world. And there you were in your, I think you might still be there in Sarasota, in your kind of back shed, as it were, developing this product. Most people would say, don't be crazy. Did you ever think that, or were you always convinced that you would be able to take them on through what you were developing?
Well, that's a great question. I think people think I'm crazy the more they get to know me, and the more they see my text messages and my posts. No, I have a crazy spirit. I am a little nuts. I think there's a fine line between genius and creativity. I think that I'm a little bit more mad at the world than I've ever been, partly due because I have a sciatic nerve problem all day long, which has really been bothering me, and I'm dealing with that. But also you deal with problems. That's, as an entrepreneur, that's all you do. You wake up and deal with this issue, that issue. And, look, I think people did think I'm crazy. I think a lot of people currently do think I'm crazy, but crazy people change the world. Rosa Parks said, I'm not going to the back of the bus. That's a little nuts. So I mean, that's one example. We can sit here all day and say, you do got to be odd. Dr. Seuss, what's he say? Be odd. The odd man is the one who gets watched, or something like that. And that's very true. So I look, Ty Warner with Beanie Babies sold more Beanie Babies in the history of toys ever. And he wore like a fur coat and a cane and a top hat. That's crazy. He's worth 2.1 billion, 2.8 billion or something like that. I don't know. He owns 4 hotels. I met him. He's a great guy. Love the guy.
Okay, so the message there very clearly from John is let's all go crazy. That's a great title for a song, actually, isn't it? I might patent that, actually, or copyright that. Yeah, okay, maybe it's been done. John talking about being crazy. And what I loved about that bit was it was a reminder to me about how we all need to think about what our difference is. And if we've got a bit of a crazy personality, I think it's good to bring it out. I wouldn't say I've got a crazy personality. I've probably got a fairly extrovert personality, I guess. Well, I must have an element of it, because I wouldn't be doing this, would I? Live streaming, during COVID. But it's very interesting how many people are, people crazy. And I think one of the points he makes, what's the point, is about the fact that there's a very thin line between crazy and genius. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And there's a lot of evidence to support that as well, actually. So I think the takeaway from that, from your own point of view, in your own businesses and in your own life, is, think about how you're going to stand out. And you don't have to be crazy as an individual, but maybe think about doing some crazy things. And it's not easy for us Brits, that, is it? Us Brits particularly are a little bit dour and a little bit serious in comparison. But, there's been some crazy stuff going on, particularly during COVID, which has been very, very successful. I think of Joe Wicks, for example. He's a bit crazy. Look at what he's managed to do with his shows over the years, and particularly, obviously, during COVID. He went crazy on Instagram, didn't he? And there's lots of different examples of that, I think. But But it doesn't have to be about you being crazy. Your marketing can be a little bit crazy, can't it? You could push the boat out with your marketing, do something a bit different, do something that's not been done before or people are not expecting. And I think that the arenas where that probably is risky but most powerful, and that's the reason it's most powerful, is in what you might call very sober industries. So for me, being honest about it, accountancy, legal profession. Now, obviously, people are very paranoid about showing any kind of craziness because then they're not taken seriously and therefore they're not seen as professional. And there's a lot of debate at the moment on LinkedIn, for example, about how serious are you supposed to be? And you've got to find that middle ground for yourself. But in terms of getting noticed and getting attention in such a noisy world, I would suggest that you've got to be going a little bit crazy in some kind of way. Now, at the moment, I'm doing 31 days of live streaming in August. It's not the most crazy thing, but I suspect there's not very many businesses that are live streaming for 31 days solid in the UK right now. There might be a few, and obviously I wouldn't know about them, but possibly not that many. So this is just my way of standing out. This is just my way of doing something that little bit different. So I think the message, excuse me, and the point from John is just think about being different. Think about how you can be different. Think about how your marketing can be different. And maybe take the odd risk or two. Don't do anything really silly that's going to embarrass you or make you lose your credibility, of course. I'm not suggesting you drop your pants and do a moon to the camera if you're an accountant in Leeds. I didn't pick Leeds specifically for any reason. It's just the first place that came into my mind. Okay, so I think that's about it. There's the 5 clips. So we've got Charles Handy talking about passion and dedication. We've got Jim Castle talking about twig carriers. We've got Kevin Parr talking about Dave, the clockwork mouse. We've got Nigel Risner talking about driving around in a Bentley as a taxi driver. And we've got John Capriola talking about being crazy when you're being an entrepreneur. And John's business, he's done numerous things, produced numerous products, of which I actually started to sell some of his products online. And so that reaching out to him resulted in me starting a completely new business about 10 years ago, selling toys. And I ended up doing a toy fair and a sports trades event and all sorts of things. So it took me on a journey, and John became a contact and a friend in the process. I think that'll do us. 16:47. That's 47 minutes. So hopefully you've got something out of that. If you've watched this live, then thank you very much indeed for watching it. I know everybody's busy. If you watched it pre-recorded, that's absolutely fine. It's just as useful. If it's useful, it'll be useful live. If it's useful, it'll be useful recorded. If it's not useful, then it doesn't matter whether you're doing it live or not, or pre-recorded, does it? So that's it. Tomorrow I've got I think it's 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. I'm back to 10:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Friday the 21st of August, and I've got Dave Scholes on. And Dave is a great character and very passionate. Talking about passion, Dave's very passionate about well-being and health and wellness and mental health and all that stuff, which of course is very relevant and very specific to the times that we're in. Dave's a shrinking violet. That was a joke. He's not a shrinking violet. He's very confident, and he's not scared to share his thoughts and his experiences with everybody, which is, of course, is great when you're doing an interview. Because if people are not like that, then they've nothing to say. You've got a bit of a problem if there's tumbleweed blowing in the background. The tumbleweed growing in the background, and you're waiting for 3 minutes for them to think and answer the question. Well, that's not Dave Scholes. Next week, a few other people. I've mentioned one or two before. Taz Thornton, I think, is joining me on Wednesday. Taz, great lady, know her personally and professionally. Done some really interesting stuff with her. which we'll talk about on the show. And she runs something called Unleash Your Awesome and has done some amazing things and is a wonderful example of dedication and commitment and consistency, which I'm going to have a chat with her about as well on next Wednesday. So anyway, that'll do for now. Got other guests which I mentioned last night, but we'll leave it for now because it's about coming up to tea time now. And I hope you've had a great day. Just one other point just before I go. Basically, shout out to Apple. I took my Apple iPad in because my keyboard to my my iPad Pro was suddenly stopped working, and I took it into the place in Manchester, and there was no fuss. It was like, yeah, we know there's a fault on these. It was out of warranty, but they said we know there's been a fault on these keyboards, and here's a new one. Blimey, I mean, you can't knock that sort of service, can you? Credit where it's due. I'm not the biggest Apple fan sometimes. I love the iPad Pro because it's really, really great to use. But I'm more a PC person, and I'm a Samsung Android user as well. But I have to say, hats off to Apple. Apple, give credit where it's due. Their service was superb for my own personal needs and wants, and also they were very thorough as well, as you might expect, I suppose, on the social distancing. You know, they check your temperature. You have to queue up in, social distance, queue up. There's no, you can't just walk into the shop and mingle around. That's not something that they allow, so it's credit where it's due there. And it's obviously everybody has to wear masks. So just thought I'd add that on at the end for no apparent reason. Just thought it's nice to maybe give companies a bit of a clap, because quite often we're all slagging them off a lot of the time, aren't we? So thanks, Apple. You were fantastic with providing me with that customer service. And on that note, I really am going. Have a great. Hope you've had a great day. Have a great evening. And for those of you that are glutton for punishment, back at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Thank you, and bye for now.